This is MOL, Minister of the Lists class with Morgan Cheney, and I've forgotten your title. I'm so sorry, but it's all yours.
Okay, so I'm Baroness Morgan Cheney. I have Baroness of the Court, and I also have a stag, so THL is appropriate as well. And so bear with me because I had technical difficulties. My notes are all on a computer that refuses to turn on. So I'm doing this on the off the cuff from my cell phone. So I do apologize.
Performing without a net.
I do that a lot. Anybody who knows me in the SCA knows that I will just jump in and do what has to get done, often without a net. So I don't know how to navigate on this Zoom thing. So if you could just kind of let me know who's here with me, that would be great.
All right. We have Ian, our Kingdom Rapier Marshal. We have Darcia and Jahan. We have Gui Hannah. I apologize. I just slaughtered your name. I'm sorry. And Lord Christoph out of Rio.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. Today I just sort of wanted to have a bit of a round table with what people, to get an idea of what people think the MOL job is, and then to kind of go over what it really is and what it could be. So, you know, our main job is to make sure that the tournaments are run and that recorded appropriately, and the results are turned in up the chain of command appropriately to the marshalate, and then up to Kingdom as well. So like I said, I am brand new to the MOL job. I kind of jumped in with both feet. I've done it. I've done MOL as a assistant multiple times, but there was a job that needed to be done, so I took it. So I guess I want to know what everybody else thinks is the most important part of the MOL position.
Oh, you missed it when I was describing how cool and awesome MOLs are. Because I was pointing out as a marshal in charge, the most important person to me is an MOL who can make just the absolute nuts and bolts of the running of a tournament flow smoothly, because their job is to organize, to to make sure that the pairings have happened properly, that if this is a particular type of tournament, everything is going to specification, and just the back end of, and the non-glorious part of the the moving parts of actually making a tournament happen.
Right. I agree 100%. And that's part of why I jumped in to take on this position, was so that, because somebody needs to do it. It's important. You have to have this position. It's one of those jobs that you can't run certain tournaments in the Kingdom without one. So I think that one thing that's the most important piece to remember is that grace under pressure part, because there will be a lot of stress on the day of the tournament, because things start moving really quickly after a while, and you're getting a lot of information coming at you all at once. So it's important to remember to have give yourself some grace, and also give the people around you some grace as well. So so thank you for recognizing that the MOL is kind of one of those more behind the scenes. We're not necessarily as visible, but it's an important job,
No, especially if people are standing in front of your table, you're not visible at all.
Well, no, but we're not the like glorious,
Right.
we're not the one out in the field announcing the combatants or marshaling the tournament, but we're just as important. So anybody
Oh,
else?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think this is Lissa. I think the MOL is one of the things that sets us apart from a fighter practice. You can run a bear pit. You don't need an MOL and fighter practice. But when you go to a tournament, the MOL is there supporting the fighters and the heralds, making everything run smoothly, making sure that whatever is going on, it's going to stay on track. You can run multiple fields with one MOL as long as you're kind to the MOL and patient. But it's very hard for marshals and heralds and fighters to do this without somebody keeping track of the order, the lists, ensuring that everyone is on the same page. Right. And that's really been one of the most wonderful things I've learned. I've been MOLing now since my second event, I think.
I was gonna say, as long as I can remember you.
Much, yeah. It's been a very, very long time. I've learned so many tricks. I've seen things change. And today I learned another one about the lost limb. I'm totally going to use that tip. We'll fill you in later on that one.
Oh, please do.
But it's just, if you want to be part of things and not be center of attention, it's central in the same way a crown is to a court, but that's visible and that's scary.
Right.
But an MOL is visible to a smaller group, but even more integral to make sure that tournaments are going and stay on track, kind of keep the pace going. Without them, you devolve into a fighter practice, and that's boring to watch.
Yes, it definitely can be. What's a tip that you would give, Lissa, people who are interested in coming on as an MOL?
Go up before the tournament starts to the MOL table and offer to help. Help the person at the table, tell them you're interested. The way I learned was sitting next to an MOL. And she was running the tournament down in Arkell. I started in Arkell. They were a baby shire back then. And she explained what she was doing when she had time. It was a very tiny tournament. I helped with the cards, and I saw how that worked. And then the next tournament, I think we ran 2 back-to-back. She actually sat with me and I was handling the cards. There were like 5 fighters. This was still scary.
Right? Yeah.
But it gets easier. If you're struggling, when you're learning especially, just tell them, the people coming to your table, please, if you can have some patience, I'm still learning the job. They will. Even when there's a lot of stress going on, don't try and run a crown tournament or anything big when you're still learning. Not that it can't go successfully, I have seen it. But, for the most part, the fighters understand that you're critical. The heralds understand you're critical. And if there's a random child who wants to be involved, they're awesome to hand cards to run them to the field. So you are part of a community. You're not alone. And just know that you can just say, hey, I need some help, or give me a little space, people.
That's the hard one for me.
That is
I need some space.
And then the other one I mentioned right before you were coming on is people have difficult days. no one's an exception to the rule. When they say, well, I have this job, you still need to see are they pink now? They were green for 35 years.
Yeah.
Your authorization card. Yes, Your Majesty. Yes, sir. Uh, the rules are there for everyone, and help them be the model of good behavior to the newer fighters by not letting them work around them as politely as you can, and ask for help if they don't want to be polite.
Oh, those are all great tips. Thank you. So anybody else have any tips they want to add? And then we'll kind of maybe talk about the different tourney types. Okay, so my my favorite to run is the just single or double a limb tournament, best 2 out of 3, or however they want to do it. But that's my favorite, probably because it's the easiest, but it's also the clearest path in my brain from 32 combatants to 2 to 1. It's just little, it's little stair steps and it's branches, and to me, that's the easiest one to do. It makes sense in my brain, but I feel like it might not necessarily be the most fun for the combatants, if that makes sense. They don't get as many fights in before they may or may not be eliminated when you do it, when we have it that way. The one that gets me, the one that I find to be the hardest is the round robins, because I really have a hard time keeping track of one has fought 2, and then they need to fight 3, and then everybody has to fight everybody. And your grid, and especially the grid that's provided in the Kingdom Handbook, which is something I want to try and kind of look at as part of my role as Kingdom MOL. The grid can get really confusing when you start marking your wins and losses in there. And I'm wondering if that's if anyone else struggles with that grid, or is it just me and the way my brain works?
That grid is terrifying. That's not how I run round robin tournaments. I have a sheet that I'm going to try and find, and I'll share if I can find it online. And if not, I'll put it on my profile. Look for me on Facebook, Maggie Griggs. And what it does is it does all that work for you. You might have to mark it on the sheets, the wins and the losses, but the pairings are all set up for you already. You don't even have to think. So I'm gonna listen a little bit while I dig for my reference sheet.
I would love that. Thank you. Bear pits are easy, because then they kind of have to just come back and report their wins and losses, and you don't have to necessarily keep track of who has fought whom. But I think those are not as much fun for me as an MOL, just because I don't get that interaction with the fighters as much as I do when they're coming to tell me who won, or setting up the pairings, et cetera. So gosh, I don't know. I apologize. I got very flustered when I couldn't get my computer to turn on this morning, and then so I'm don't have my notes, and now I feel like I'm starting to ramble a little bit. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to the discussion, or any questions? Do we have any questions?
I mean, if you're looking at an interesting tournament, it's a simple, random pairing sort of thing, but it's referred to as a pine box, which is neat because you don't have to track anything, and you don't have to, you in some cases can jump from here's all the entrants to, hey, we're in the finals already very quickly, because the only way out of this tournament is in a pine box. It is a first blood, wounds retained, single elimination tournament.
Huh.
So if you never get hit, nothing changes for you. You just keep going. If you take a cut to the arm, you now don't have that arm going forward in the tournament. And the only addition to this from what people think of is you have to mock people who kill their opponents, because that's not the point. The point is just to get rid of that person. Just it's first blood. That's what we're here for. So the first time I ever saw this tournament run, it was the second round, and somebody took someone out with a headshot, and we're all just looking at him going, "Do we get to mock Malcolm now?"
Fun. That does
Yeah,
sound like
it is a wild tournament, because occasionally you've got, I mean, if you do it right, you start with, you got 18 people you start with. Second round, you got 18 people. Third round, you might still have 18 people if everybody's still, able to fight. And then all of a sudden you get attrition, because now I no longer have a leg and an arm, or I've lost both my arms, or somebody accidentally messed up and killed me. Now you start to see people fall out of it. And with the rules the way they are right now, it's a little quicker. In the East Kingdom 15, 20 years ago, that tournament could be very long, because it took 2 cuts to disable limbs, 2 cuts to disable your head, 2 cuts to disable the ribs, but not the guts, so you had to keep track of, and hands and arms are separate.
Oh, okay.
Feet and legs are separate. So you had to keep track of how many cuts you'd sustained. But I could cut you on the hand and win the bout, because that's first blood. I win. But you come back, you still have both hands. And we get, random pairings. I might face you again. But if I take that same hand, because I know I already took it, now you have one hand down. But you can still use this arm until I take that. And I have 2 cuts here, and I've got 2 cuts here, and I've got 2 cuts on the leg, and I've got 2 cuts. It took a long time. It really made it a lot more fun once we moved to the current society standard of 1 cut, hands and arms are the same, legs and feet are the same. But it's still a fun tournament idea, because it is very different than your standard, I'm being competitive and I need to make it through my bracket kind of tournament mindset, because now you're fighting like a period swords person. I don't want to be touched by that thing. I'm going to defend myself, and if I can get a touch on my opponent, I can walk out of this unscathed.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. Awesome.
Yeah,
I might have to mention that to some other people and see if
I keep mentioning it, no one will let me run it.
Well, if I mention it too, maybe somebody will.
I mean, because the other one that I like to do is, everybody gets single offhand short weapon. It's nobody wants me to do that one either. Something about me being lefty, which means my right hand fighting is stronger than most people's left hands fighting, and I already like a 30-inch blade.
Daisha or Jahan, your hand up.
Yeah, I just the magic of pairings is what always confuses me. I've been in some tournaments where the pairings were terribly done, and the tournaments where they're just magically perfect. I don't know. I know they're randomized, but there's something different that makes a really good pairing tournament. How do you do it?
How I do it is I always start the first tournament. Well, the first pairing that I draw, because like with Crown, the unbelteds always get to choose their first opponent. So I don't really get a whole lot to do with the first round in Crown, but other ones, I will draw the first round and then I kind of look at it. So I would be like, oh, Daisha and Jahan get to fight each other all the time. Let's mix this up. Or, for that very first round, I try to make it so that it's not the same people who fight the same people all the time, starting with that random draw and then mixing it up a little bit. And then as we go forward, it has to stay a blind draw from that point forward. But I kind of like to always start that first one with getting people with a new fight, or somebody that I know they don't get to fight all the time. So if I have 4 people from Kerta and 4 people from Dragonspine in a tournament, I'm going to try and pair it I might take the 4 dragon spines and put, you know, those 4 down and then put a random keratin with them just to mix it up for that first draw. Just because I feel like it's a little bit more fair in the long run for them to get to fight at least their first fight with on a sort of even keel, and not be with somebody that they fight all the time, so they both know each other's tricks and it turns out to be a quick fight or not, or a really long fight, and everybody else is like, okay, you two quit playing with your food and finish this finish this fight. So, and it also kind of depends on what tournament, because like I mentioned with Crown, those have to be completely random. I can't mix and match with them a lot, other than if I accidentally pull 2 people who just fought each other. Like, you know, Duke Bob and Duke George just had a fight. I'm not going to put them back in the next round together. And so the magic is more in the integrity of the pairing rather than, I know that there have been in the past some rumors of MOLs who intentionally put certain fighters together throughout the entire tournament to try and lead the way. And I refuse to do that. It's dishonorable and not fun for anyone in the long run when something like that comes out. So, but the magic for me is just making sure that, you know, I'm not going to put you and Jahan in the same fight in the first round of a tournament, because I know you fight each other all the time. So if I do draw the 2 of you for that first round, I'm going to put one of you back in, pull somebody out, pull whoever the next card that would have come out, I would match with you, and then I'd put Jahan down and pull the next random person. As much as possible. Sometimes, you know, after that first round, it becomes impossible to do that.
Right, exactly.
But, and I think it's also just paying attention to the fact that, you know, oh, look, Bob and Joe just fought each other in that last round. Let's not try to have them knock each other out of the tournament in the second round. We have some flexibility in being able to adjust the fights that way, as long as it's still a blind draw. As long as I'm not going, okay, Bob and Joe fought, I can't have them fight again, so I'm going to specifically put Joe with Fred and Bob with Bill. It's just going to be, here's Joe, here's Bob, we're going to put 2 random people with them so that they don't end up with each other again. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the idea of what I was thinking, because I just don't know how you guys do it, but I guess it is just weird card drawing, and then those little tweaks that you guys make all the difference.
Exactly. And as long as the person drawing the cards is being, you know, above board and having integrity, then you should still keep all that kitty magic. Sorry, I had a squee for a minute. Kitty magic. All that magic of random drawings. Oh my gosh, too cute. So, yeah. Anyone else?
Like Christoph has his hand up.
Oh, I didn't see that. Go ahead, Christoph.
Yep. So just a comment. The fighters really appreciate it when you're doing a round robin tournament like we did at Princess Protectorate, because it's broken down into 4 pits of 7 or 8 people. And for all of us fighters that have to travel 4+ hours to get to anywhere to get to anywhere on the front range, it's like, it's really nice to be able to fight people that we don't get to see on any kind of regular basis. So when you can run those round robins, it's great. And pickups are great, just not everyone has the time or the energy to do pickups after the tournament, especially if they fought all the way to the end.
Sure. And I understand. I think I like round robin tournaments for the fighters. I dislike them for me, if that makes sense. As the MOL, I'm like, oh, this is confusing me, and it goes so fast sometimes that it's hard to, you know, if you get distracted in the slightest, it's very easy to mistake one just fought 2, but you accidentally recorded as 3. So it can be very confusing as an MOL, but I see the appeal as a fighter.
Yeah, we
Believe it or
appreciate your
not-
efforts.
Thank you. Believe it or not, I did actually used to be a fencer many, many years ago. And so I see both sides of that tournament thing. I think for me, it's important that I understand where the fencers and heavy fighters and cut and thread, anyone for that matter, is coming from. And I'm not just coming at it from a spectator point of view. I like to understand all the rules. I think it's important for the MOL, even if they aren't a combatant, to understand the rules of the tournament and the rules of fencing, the rules of heavy fighting. I know we're not marshals and we're not necessarily required to read the marshals handbooks and understand all the rules, but I strongly suggest that MOLs do at least have a basic understanding of all the rules of combat. So, anyone else?
This is Lissa again. I did find a hard copy of my form, and I received this many years ago. I dropped the link into the chat. I'm going to try and locate the big one I did, because this one covers through a pool of 45 people. I did a really fancy extrapolation card that I usually have with me. It's in the stuff that goes to events, apparently. And it extrapolates out to, I think, 15. It tells you estimates and such. Let me see if I switch. Well, sharing my pronouns isn't very helpful as an option.
Oh, pool
Here.
of 10, 45 fights.
Yeah.
Got it.
So,
Oh,
it's
I like.
probably backwards. There we go. There's my camera. So if you have 3 fighters, whoops. There we go.
There
I'm
you are.
totally doing this backwards and what I can see on my screen. 1 fights 3, 1 fights 2, 2 fights 3. And then you go into the next column and the numbers are all here. Some of the magic happens up top. Everybody's got the numbers. The way I learned to do this was to manage it on 3x5 cards.
Mhm.
And 3x5 cards is a little bit easier because you've got places you can scribble and write and remove spotlights. There we go. So you can actually go through and lay everyone out by numbers, and you can actually go in and put everybody alphabetical. Everybody's going to fight everybody. So in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter where you put them on the form. But if you know that your very first round is everything above that first double line, when you have a pool of 4, first round, 1 fights 4, 2 fights 3. When you put them on the top of the form, that's where you'll say, we're not going to list all the Caretons and all the Dragon Spinions and all the Rio people right in order. And so you can kind of massage that first round by where you wrote them on the top. And then you just write down who won. And you can work all the way through. After that first round, everybody's going to fight everybody anyway, but everybody got a new fight if you can manage it. It's not always possible. But it's really very cool from the MOL perspective that your pairings are already done. Mark up the form, cross them off, you know they're done. If you're not getting information as to who won and who lost, ask your herald to mark those cards. Those 3x5 cards, the herald with a pen and the cards that they just called people to the field off of can certainly write Joe won, Bob won, Mary won on that card so that you have a cross-reference on your paperwork. So it's nice that one fought 4, but if your herald writes down, well, on this card, Joe won and Joe was fighter 1, you have a cross check in case anything gets messed up later. Having that secondary source with the cards really helps. And then you wind up on the top of the form writing in who won. But I guarantee you, you're going to have 5 cards handed to you all at once.
Mhm.
All at once. And suddenly you have 5 cards in one hand and you're trying to put another 5 cards out the door in the other. And where that 6th card went is a mystery. We'll find it later. But if you can enlist the help of your heralds in writing down who won on the pairing of cards in their hand, that will at least give you a cross check for later. If you've not worked through this before, sorry.
Goodness.
This is the last of my long COVID. I can talk for a certain amount and then the cough.
Yeah.
But with this, it helps a lot. You're not having to think, has 3 already fought 4? I don't know. Well, you've got your chart right on the form.
I love that.
And this was a gift to me many years ago, I think by the first or second person I worked with. So I'm going to scan it proper and I will put it on. I'll make sure to message Cheney so she can get it where she needs it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liz. I appreciate that.
And this makes round robins a lot easier so that you can have a little bit of fun too, because we all know the fighters love it.
Right. Yeah. So I like that. Great. Does anybody else have anything they want to? Any more questions? I'm so new at this job that I don't really know what I don't know yet, other than the fact that I probably do know it. I just don't remember since I've been either a fighter or a helper or I mean, I've been playing this game for so long that I probably do know the answer. I just don't know that I do to most of my questions. But I really am hoping that we can get someone, even if they're shyer or Barony doesn't do a whole lot of tournaments, that we can get someone in each group who is excited about being an MOL, and then letting the MOLs help each other out. So, if Crown Tournament's in Rio, then I really want the Rio MOL with me helping out at the tournament. And then, obviously my deputies and anyone else who wants to help. But I really want to make sure that, especially the smaller groups that don't get to have a lot of tournaments, have an MOL that's excited and still gets to do the job. So that's part of my one of my goals for my tenure in this position, is to get at least one person in each group who has had some time, some experience, has gotten to do some tournaments. Battlemore is another great place for that because there's so many tournaments that happen at Battlemore. I can't possibly run them all by myself. I'm going to need a group of people that I can rely on to help me with them. And I'm thinking that tapping the MOLs from each group to run a different set of tournaments is the best way to do that. Plus it gets people practice, because just like the combat, if you don't practice your MOL skills, they'll get rusty. Just like if I don't practice my archery skills, those are going to get rusty too. So that's one of my goals. And then the other goal is to kind of look at that MOL handbook and say, okay, this piece in here, this piece of information is that word that I can't say right now, superfluous. There we go. And we don't really need it in the handbook, but we do need, hey, this is a much better form to use for this tournament. All of the MOLs have used it now that are currently active, and we want to replace the old one. So I just that's one of my other goals, is to have the MOLs kind of look at the handbook together and see how we can make it better so that it's easier for the next group to step up and take on the positions. Because it's not a job you're going to ever really want to give up, but eventually you're going to want to give it up because you're tired. And to that end, I do have a group for the Kingdom MOLs on Facebook. It's a private group. So if I'll send you an invite, Lisa. So anyone else who is out there who is interested in joining that group, please let me know and I will make sure that you get an invite to it. So, anybody?
Towards your first goal, one of the things that I've seen over the years, especially if there's only a small group of fighters, is that they don't want to have a formal tournament. They don't want to, they just want to get out there and fight. That's
Right.
a direct quote. And as a result of that mentality, sometimes the fight overrules the need for heralds, need for MOLs, and that makes it really tough. I'm in a barony, and we had a good pool of fighters when our Knight Marshal came up with the fight mentality. And every tournament was like going to fighter practice, most boring time in our barony's history. So encouraging the fighters to understand how MOLs can make things work smoother, that they're not a roadblock, they're not a stumbling block. That's something that all of the leaders of the community and the Kingdom officers can do to kind of help support the MOLs and the heralds. I mean, for heaven's sake, our most active herald in the barony during that time refused to herald because he had been, there's no good word. He had been he had been the victim of rude dismissal.
Right.
And he's not easily discouraged. And so MOLs who are less brash weren't even making the effort. They didn't want to try. And really, could you blame them?
No.
But the one thing that we can do is to help instill an understanding of why MOLs and heralds make the pageantry, make the tournament more interesting so you can get back to bashing each other with a sword. We want you to bash each other with a sword. We want you to poke each other with your pointy sticks. And we want you to do it in such a way that people want to come see you, to appreciate your artistry on the field. And that's the one pushback that I think a lot of, especially newer people, encounter, and they just don't know how to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more that we can kind of intervene and say, hey, this is really important, and maybe encourage allowing an MOL to practice at fighter practice, to learn their skills right there. Y'all gonna pound on each other no matter what anyway, but a mini tournament is a wonderful practice for an event tournament for the fighters, but also for the MOL and the support staff. And so that might help. There will be places where the fight mentality is deeply seated, and it's an uphill battle. But it's less intimidating to run a tournament with the 5 guys who've shown up for fighter practice until you kind of know what's going on, to try different formats, than at an event where there's a lot more pressure.
I kind of like the idea of maybe coaching it as, hey, you guys get fighter practice, but heralds don't get herald practice, and MOLs don't get MOL practice. So can we just let everybody practice at practice?
That's a good idea. And it really helps people break the mentality of, well, it's a fighter practice mentality of self-managed fighting, which is beautiful for learning and perfecting your skills. But for the pageantry of the SCA, for something visually appealing, well, it lacks visual appeal in all aspects. It's not a spectator sport at that point. It's boring.
I know where I was in the East, we were right in the middle of the East Kingdom, and we were one of the most populous regions. So was it a big culture shock for me to move to here and have one fencer? Yes, it was. because my practice routinely had 18 to 25 people at it all the time. So one of the things that we did do occasionally, especially when we started to swell with new people or people who were relatively recent but who had never been in a tournament, was we would do a mock tournament like that. And yeah, it's really neat because if you do it right, everybody gets a chance to practice. You're a new person, you've never been in a tournament before, this gives you a chance to see what you will expect. You're an MOL who hasn't run a tournament yet, well, this gives you a chance to get get a handle on. And it's not like just 5 people, it's 18 to 25 people. So you get a handle for, how do I have to manage this many people at a time?
Right.
And since most of the heralds in our area were also fencers, we never had a shortage of heralds. But yeah, it was kind of neat to be able to say, in this large echoey basement that we're doing here, we're going to do, instead of our regular thing, we're going to cut at half an hour in. Everybody's going to get ready. We're going to have registered for the tournament. We're going to run this tournament. And I know we did that a couple of times before for major things. K&Q Rapier, for example, we did a couple of times where like the 3 weeks leading up to that was just all mock tournaments of various kinds. Yeah, it can be very, very cool, and it can be very cool for everybody involved, especially if what you have going on is just I go to fighter practice to fight until my brains fall out mentality. Yeah, it's an opportunity for everybody involved in a tournament to get a chance to work on it. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that, especially because I know coming out of COVID, a lot of our groups are sort of trying to combine fighter practice with populace gathering, trying to encourage everyone to come out to the fighter practice time frame, and that gives them an audience to watch their fight, and it gives them heralds to practice heralding and MOLs to practice MOLing, and it's a whole, I feel like,
except in our shire where I am both the fencer and the herald.
Well, maybe we could get
Get all
I'm
15 of
making
us
something
together in a room. It's crazy.
to encourage people to to travel to other fighter practices, to that way you're fighting somebody else, and hey, they're having this, and maybe it's a prize tournament, I don't know, you get to win a
Yeah,
cool something, and it's not always about winning a title, or not title, but a position of honor, but it's about getting a cool something. I don't
sure.
know, maybe that's something that the marshalate and the MOLs and the heralds could all work on together to try and give everybody that practice that they need, so that when we get to Battlemore, everybody's ready to do those things. And when we could travel and we have the Outlands tournament at Estrella, well, maybe not at Estrella anymore, but whatever the new iteration of Estrella is,
Sure.
we're ready to go, and we have people who are trained up and ready to pitch in and help and have fun. I have to think about that. So
Yeah, like
nice.
Christoph was saying earlier, it's a bit of a bum deal that the kingdom that we live in is as enormous as it is and so spread out, because it means that someone like Christoph, someone like myself, someone like my student, we can't just jet over to Kerta for an evening practice, because while I know they've got them and they've got a lot of people, that's a hike, and that's not a thing that you can do. I mean, look, have we gotten to the point where the 4-hour drive over the mountains is not a thing? Yes. However, it's still 4 hours. And if you go 4 hours over the mountain to hit a 6 o'clock practice that gets over at 10, you still got to get 4 hours back and go to work the next day.
Right.
Yeah, which has been a bit of a downer for us in the outer lying region. That's, I've heard it from a lot of people that, yeah, it would be really neat to do that, but I have a job.
And it's been, but maybe, and I don't know, maybe they have a special Saturday practice just for those types of things. I'm thinking outside the box.
Oh, sure.
Just brainstorming at the moment, but I I just feel like, because I do feel like, because I grew up, I started my SCA life. I started my SCA life in Drakemore. So
Oh,
yeah, I know that 4-hour drive. It's like, okay, so I have 8 hours to Loxlon or 4 hours to Kerito. Which way am I going to drive? So obviously I'm going to drive the 4 hours because I'm a college student and I don't have the gas money to drive the 8 hours. But at the same time, I have to come back and go to class. So, you know, it's definitely hard to be the one kind of stuck out in the distance. So I like to come up with different ways to help those people who are a little further away and aren't like, oh, I live in Kerta. It's easy to run up to Cairgallon for practice.
So we're a few minutes before 12. We got started late and there's nothing right behind us, but the lunch hour approaches. So I can keep the room open. I'm going to leave the room open for the afternoon session anyway. So folks are welcome to stick around. And Morgan, you can keep going or call it an hour, whatever you would like.
I think we'll call it an hour so that I can do my tech trying to get everything straightened. I'm possibly not sitting on the couch holding my phone for all of my next class. So anybody who is with us right now and is interested in retinue and working retinue, I will be teaching my next class on retinue. I think it's at 1.
Let
My
me
brain.
double check the schedule here for you.
I think that's right.
Yes, you'll be in room 6 and you've got until 1 o'clock approximately to solve your tech issues, and don't feel bad. As a Zoom host, I have actually had tech issues, which I was grateful to have the work computer nearby.
I don't know if any of you guys saw any of the peering at the Outlands episodes that we did. My first episode, I interviewed Antoine, who had to hastily set up somebody else's computer in a different room, and midway through answering a question, kicked the power cord out. So I'm just like, I'm sitting there, I'm hosting and listening to the answer, and I'm just, okay, Antoine seems to have left us. So real quick, vamp. And he figured it out. He got back. The worst one though was Doma, because somewhere in the middle of Doma's, my internet had issues, so I could hear him the whole time, but I had to look at a still image of him from the middle of a question. A while back, I couldn't get reaction off of him and see where we were going with things because the video had frozen. So I did this entire interview mostly blind until we sorted out that, oh yeah, it was my browser.
Oops.
Okay, well, I feel much better. Thank you.
Oh, you bet.
But again, I do apologize for being late and not having all my notes available to me. So I'm going to go either try and kick it or something and see if I can't get that working for my next class. So thank you everybody for coming and joining me. And I hope that if you were here to learn something, you learned. And if you were here to share, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go try and see if my my lovely wife in the next room needs lunch.
All right. Thank you, everybody.